there's a few terms that we need to consider before we start. Trade, which is buying and selling. Exports, new products produced in one country, sold to another country. And then imports, goods a country buys from another country. So in particular, we're going to look at our low-income country today, which is Malawi, and we're going to look at why there's uneven development in Malawi. Well, reasons why there's uneven development there is because they haven't really been able to develop economically because of their exports, because they export primary goods such as flowers. These are cheap items, meaning that they are not being able to fully benefit from increasing their economy. They're having to import manufactured goods such as agricultural machinery. This is very expensive, so their imports are far more expensive than their exports. And in terms of trade, they don't make enough money from their exports to pay for their imports, and therefore they do lose money. And there's some sort of cycle of poverty then that they are within, and it means that they have to borrow money in order to not go into debt. Obviously, then, if you can flip that completely, you are looking at high income countries, and where they can export high valued products, items, and import low value product and items, meaning that they can increase and develop their country. So trade blocs help this in high income countries. Countries outside the trade bloc fail out economically. Well, what is a trade bloc? Well, importing and exporting items, products freely without limitations. And it can also be done within people as well, but people can move freely without limitations. So if you fall outside, you essentially can fail economically without this. These are low-income countries that would fail economically without this. So an example would be the European Union. A country within a trade bloc will, for example, the European Union imposes an import duty on tax and goods that are imported from a country outside the bloc. It is very difficult for African countries, for example, Ghana, to sell goods inside the trade bloc. The European Union, they face customs and quotas before taking their produce, for example, banana, into another country, for they lose money, and they lack then the trade and being able to use this trade due to the customs and quotas that they face. Okay, what is globalization? Because globalization also affects and causes this uneven development, especially in countries such as Malawi. Well, it's people, ideas, and money and goods create World Wide Web that is more complex. So this idea that we're sort of one global village, and that we are so extremely connected now. So the movement of people, ideas, and money and goods then. Process connects people and places from every country and continent. The term is also used to describe companies such as transnational companies or multinational companies, looking at the whole world rather than their area, their local areas, as a place to supply labor, raw resources, and markets. So how big companies such as Nike would come in and could use the whole labor of the whole world or the resources of the world to benefit that company and that company's growth. So what is a multinational company or transnational company? Well, it's a company that manages a product or deliveries of service in more than one country. So it has to happen in more than one country. The headquarters control the company in one country, but it's operating in a number of countries across the world. For example, Coca-Cola headquarters are in the USA, manufacturing in India, and the market is mainly in Europe. Okay, so looking at these ideas, this also contributes towards uneven development, and exacerbated by globalization. So low wages, companies are able to employ more people for less money, which means that manufacturing costs are lower, leading to more profit. Employing low-skilled labor in many low-income countries, there's a shortage of jobs, so the local population is willing to do hard jobs for long hours, so sort of manual labor. This is the kind of work that's not so appealing in a high-income country. Investment in a country, the companies will build factories and infrastructure in the country to facilitate the transport of goods in and out. This will attract other companies to set up in the same location as a result. Using natural resources, transnational companies can cut the cost of shipping and importing goods by local resources. This will enable the company to complete manufacturing more quickly and increase profits. low rent and rent on land. In a campaign to attract transnational companies, the government can offer incentives, such as cheap land, reduced taxes, or even lower rates or rents that will sort of enable transnational companies to settle there. Less rules regarding health and safety standards. Transnational companies have to pay a lot in order to meet these environmental standards or health and safety rules, and these are mainly set in high-income countries. So in order to go against that and decrease these costs, they can then set up their companies in lower income countries to avoid this additional cost. Close to new markets in those countries. China, for example, is home to 1.4 billion people. If they open factories such as the Nike factory in China, this means that they've got a potential of 1.4 billion people, customers that they could sell these new items to. So in Nike sweatshops, we do need to sort of look at the benefits of globalization, but also the disadvantages. Now, I've put the poor working conditions in the wrong box, so sorry about that. But for example, in Vietnam, Nike has set up a sweatshop. It sort of helps to reduce poverty and means that there's more job availability and more sources of employment. It means it's education that they're also injecting into the local community. There's foreign investment made into that area. However, disadvantages, poor working conditions, there's unemployment, and I put this in capitals because unemployment both meaning in the countries where the clothes were made before, and eventually they will reduce jobs in Vietnam. Increased lifestyle diseases and redistribution of workers and displacement of workers as well. So the workers aren't all in one area, they've been displaced. So there's an exam question that you could consider at home. Explain why some consider globalization as an increased threat. So you then would speak about disadvantages of globalization, in particular to high-income countries and low-income countries. So you could do sort of 3 points on both using connectives as well, because that's so. Okay, tourism. We're going to look at tourism in a newly industrialized country, in particular how it increases its development and growth in economy. Now, apologies that I couldn't translate this into English as it was a PDF. However, we can see from this a set of data that shows the recent developments in tourism in millions. So these are across different continents over time. Now, you could get a question with a set of data like this asking you what graph that you could use to present your data and why you'd use it. Well, you've got to think, could I use a pie chart? Could I use a line graph? Could I use a bar graph? Could I use a choropleth map, for example? Now, I'd probably say here that the bar graph would be the best one to use, as you've got qualitative and you've got quantitative data. If you've got two sets of quantitative data, so just numbers and numbers either side and possibly something over time, then you could use a line graph. But because we've got qualitative data and quantitative data, it means that a bar graph would be more suited here. Okay, then we're going to be looking at India as our newly industrialized country, and we're going to look at why they've seen economic growth. Well, they've seen economic growth because there's been an investment in education there of skilled workers. There's investment from transnational companies. They've got quite a stable government. They're actually the second largest English-speaking workforce in the whole world. There's good infrastructure links there and good use of energy. Young workforce, and they're willing to work long hours to seek the pay. And development in tourism and the tertiary sector, especially in the service sector in India. Well, we want to look at, in particular, tourism and how tourism is affecting India's growth. Well, it's employing approximately 41 million people in India. It creates 9.4% of the total GDP. That's 275 million. However, there are seasonal jobs. In the wet season, it means that there are a number of tourists. So this is obviously negative. A number of tourism developments are owned by foreign companies, so the profit doesn't stay in the country, lost profits, again, negative. It can cause a decline in local culture, traditions, loss of language, more people speaking English as a result. This could be seen as negative. Promotes the country's culture and lifestyle and an opportunity to try new foods, and it can create heritage sites that are protected, such as the Taj Mahal. So something positive there. Also, tourism promotes the improvement of linguistic skills, for example, local guides and taxi drivers. So here we can see there are positive and negative effects of this growth in tourism in India. However, there have been problems in cloven tourism and cruise tourism. So local population usually not allowed to use facilities that have catered for tourists, even beaches. So cloven tourism looks at a sort of a location whereby a resort is built, and it's built far away from the community where the community can't use it or be a part of the sort of tourist destination. So as it says here, they're not usually used to be, the local population can't use the facilities because of this cloven tourism. For example, we see here, all beach huts and chairs are for resort guests only. Leads to a loss of profit, tourist money staying within the transnational holiday companies rather than local businesses. With all-inclusive holidays, guests have paid for drinks and food before, and they won't actually spend money when it comes to being there and giving money to local businesses. So the investment is all taken away and maybe not given to the local area. So an exam question for you to consider here: tourism is beneficial to the development of a newly industrialized low-income country. So country, that I should say, sorry. To what extent do you agree with this statement? Now, if you were to do this question at home, you can consider these points and also these points as well. You'd say that we had looked at India as our example. So you'd give the example of the country. You'd agree or disagree. I strongly agree. Agree. Maybe strongly disagree. To some extent, you agree. You would give reasons, advantages and disadvantages, and then remember connectives as well. So on one hand, on the other hand, and then come to some sort of conclusion at the end. So if you'd like to give this question a go and give the screen a pause now, probably for a second. Okay, we're also looking at a low-income country, Malawi, and why there is an uneven development in Malawi. Well, there's uneven development in Malawi because, one, it's landlocked. If you think about the fact that landlocked countries really are at a disadvantage because they aren't able to export and import goods easily. It has to happen through other countries, which does negatively impact Malawi as a country and negatively impact how Malawi can develop. Obviously, the AIDS epidemic has affected the young workforce. They mainly export tea, which is a sort of low income good, and they import oil, coal and gas, which are all quite expensive. And there are low levels of education in this country. 90% of the population live on less than $2 American dollars a day. So these are some reasons why Malawi is still actually poor. How could we react to this inequality and sort of better the level of development in Malawi, for example? Well, we're now going to look at international aid from government and non-governmental organizations in order to reduce inequality in Malawi. So some important terms, and these are types of aid and support that can be given. So there's bilateral aid, which is financial aid or food, clothing, or emergency aid given directly by the government of one country to another. So this could be given by the UK government to Malawi government, so bilateral aid. Then there's multilateral aid, which is funding provided by many countries, so that's the multi. Emergency aid, help that is given urgently after a natural disaster or conflict in order to help protect the lives of survivors. Development aid, this is long-term. This is to help tackle poverty or improve inequalities, such as education or healthcare. Eradication of debt, then, aiming to wipe out debt from poor countries, and non-governmental organizations help through charities such as Oxfam and Save the Children. So organizations that are non-for-profit that work directly with local communities. It's important for us to also understand the United Nations and their role in this in order to promote global cooperation, and the fact that they work as a multi-government sort of agency or organization with over 180 countries across the world. Right, an important term that we need to learn now is intermediate technology. This means technology that is appropriate for a low-income country, as it does not require expensive parts or high-tech repairs. So it's a sort of way of being able to help a community in one aspect. And we're going to look at an example now in Malawi and how they use an intermediate technology. So the COVAMS scheme is the project of community vitalization and afforestation in the Middle Shire, and they've used intermediate technology here, education and self-support. So if you'd like to click on that link, there's more information on there as well. You can do so by downloading the PowerPoint off the e-sgol website. To summarize this scheme, well, it's a Save the Soil scheme. So again, like I've said, afforestation, to aim on planting more and looking after the soil. So it's a 10-year supported project with use of intermediate technologies, enabling Malawi to create more food and create more jobs. And they've used several methods in order to prevent soil erosion, such as explaining the causes of soil erosion to the communities, erection of rock, wood and bamboo barriers across streams, so the soil is not lost during the wet seasons. They trained the villagers on how to save the soil and plant trees, training farmers to plough around the sides of the hills, following the contours rather than ploughing up. So sort of different techniques in order to farm better, build terraces on the hillside to reduce the surface runoff, supply of fast-growing tree species from local plantations in order to speed up reforestation. So providing them with the best trees in order to reforest the area and make the soil better. It's important for us to also understand the work of fair trade. So fair trade works with farmers and workers. They improve lifestyles and invest in their communities and businesses and protect a shared environment. Fair trade achieves this by rallying global communities of millions, farmers and workers, supply chains, partners, brands, retailers, shoppers, schools, governments to pay fair prices and uphold fair production standards and practices. It ensures that the farmers and the workers with the low incomes are given a fair wage. Here on the screen are some economic, social and environmental impacts or effects that fair trade has. So maybe it's an idea for you to press pause on the video. However, I'm going to read one of each on the top. So the fair trade minimum price supports farmers who grow products such as cocoa, coffee and bananas to become more secure in terms of income and less vulnerable to poverty. Social then, the fair trade standards cover key areas of environmental protection, including reducing energy, greenhouse gases, soil, water quality, pest control, protecting biodiversity, for example. Then farmers who farmers and workers who choose to participate in fair trade often see a real sense of control over their future with more power and voice. That should have been a social, that should have been environmental. Sorry about that. Another question then. You could have one of these 8-mark questions with sources. Now, it's important for us to be aware of these kind of questions. Now, when we have a question with the sources, it is integral that you use the source. Now, we can obviously make it very clear to the examiner that we're using the source by saying the source suggests, I have the source tells us this, or something, which was knowledge gained from the source. And the question is, fair trade projects are the best way to help development of low-income countries. To what extent do you agree with the statement? So you can use information that would suggest, yes, they do help, but also consider possible, well, no, actually, these projects, such as the COVAMs in Malawi, also help, where the non-governmental organizations who come together and work with local communities in order to see a sort of a project support and a plan to help produce more food and gain jobs. So here, of course, remember, you've got two sides of the argument at all times. Use connectives, because, but, so, come to some sort of conclusion, and sort of remember to use key terms, I should say, sort of terms. Okay, also important for us to recognize the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, that were given in 2015, set by 2030, and there are 17 of them. They are sort of governed by the UN of global goals that they want to achieve, and better a country's development and countries' human development. So, for example, we've got no poverty, zero hunger, quality of education, gender equality, clean water, reduced inequalities. So here are some examples of how non-governmental organizations are going about the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if you'd like to download this PowerPoint on the e-sgol website, you can click the links of these videos and learn more about what these non-governmental organizations do in particular countries, and this will give you more information ready for the examination, as you will need case studies ready. But for some example, I've given and reduced some information here. So I've looked at emergency aid, development aid, and also if there's been an actual benefit of this. So the UK government, for example, gave £20 million to Haiti during the 2010 earthquake. That was short-term aid. Oxfam, as a non-governmental organisation, the public raises and donates money to Oxfam. They buy they buy resources then, such as blankets, water, building materials, for example, the Haiti earthquake, and help people then. Development aid then, there actually is a Department of International Development Aid. They've spent 8.5 billion over the last 10 years. They make sure that girls and boys everywhere can complete at least 5 years of education. Oxfam then, in terms of their development aid, they've also worked on education, but for example, through the ADESAH in Mali and Niger, to help children come from families from nomadic farmers to go to school. And this has actually encouraged more girls to go to school and being able to have resources such as books. Well, has there been an increase then? Well, yeah, in the UK government, there's 41 million children registered for primary education, 95 girls for each 100 boys receiving education in developing countries. And then for Oxfam, yeah, 4,000 children from nomadic families registered in schools, women are managing schools and taking a keen part in education. And they've received more books on a book ratio. So we can see that non-governmental organisations are integral in helping in communities in particular and local communities, whereas maybe the government takes a larger role in giving to governments, and then they dilute that within communities then. Reasons for and against aid. Emergency aid saves lives. So 4, profits from projects, for example, top down, so government-led projects can go to multinational companies instead of the people who need the most. Aid still does not reach the people who need it because the government of some see it as corruption. The country may become dependent on aid from another country. Country that gives aid put enormous pressure on another country's government into financial pressure then. Development aid, such as COVAMs, improves livelihoods in the long term. Natural resource development aid is beneficial to the global economy. Aid to countries creates jobs, and aid to farming methods increases food supply, like the COVAMs that we looked at. And medical care training supports improves everyone's health. Okay, the question here that you could get: explain how non-governmental organisations provide aid to low-income countries to fulfil one or more sustainable development goals. So these are the examples which were in the videos on the previous slide that you could look at. So in Uganda, they have economic relief. Ghana, they got fair trade. Nepal, they have water aid. Malawi, it's COVAMs. In this answer, you'd have to look at what kind of support they offer, explain the support there is, how that they've helped. Is there a positive or negative multiplier effect? So has this actually had an impact, and how? And what development target would this actually hit then on the Sustainable Development Goals? So maybe looking at reducing inequalities or reducing poverty or reducing hunger, for example. So if you'd like to give the video a pause and give this question a try. Okay, similar question then here. Outline how international aid and governmental and non-governmental organizations can help to reduce inequality in one low-income or newly industrializing country of your choice. So we've looked at low-income countries here. So you would, in this question, maybe it would be about 8 marks. You would define the type of aid. So is it long-term aid? Is it short-term aid? Note what country. Sorry, I put NIC, I meant low-income country, and then you'd say the 2 sustainable development goals that you'd be discussing. For example, looking at goal 5, inequality, explain at least 4 elements to reduce inequality, and what the scheme has done to reduce it. Goal 3, then, for example, explain what problems young children face, and then you would say 4 elements of what has been done to reduce this inequality, who's done it, what non-governmental organization has given aid, and then any use of examples and statistics in this answer. This would be about 8 marks. So if you'd like to give this a pause and give this a try using the notes of the videos, you can go ahead.